The Lloyd Arabella was a passenger car produced by the Borgward Group in West Germany between 1959 and 1961. After the company's controversial bankruptcy, the Arabella continued to be produced, albeit in greatly reduced quantities, and now branded as the Borgward Arabella till 1963. By the standards of the time and place, it would have been defined as a small family car. The Arabella was the first, and as matters turned out the last, car from Borgward's Lloyd division to be fitted with a four-cylinder engine, body and chassis. The Arabella was a completely new design, owing nothing to the Lloyd Alexander, which it initially complemented and then replaced in the manufacturer's range. It was developed in just 23 months, which later commentators have asserted was much too short a period in which to identify and eliminate teething troubles ahead of launch. It was constructed using a frame of tube steel with cross members. The front wheels were suspended with double wishbone connectors with coil springs and telescopic shock absorbers, and the back wheels on trailing arms with coil springs with an anti-roll bar. The brakes, considered advanced at the time, were applied using a hydraulic linkage with 4 light alloy 200mm brake drums. The handbrake was operated mechanically and worked on the rear wheels. Almost as innovative at the time was the specification of tubeless tires on the 13" wheels. The rack and pinion steering required 3.36 between opposite locks, and the turning circle was 10.7 meters, 35 feet. The all-steel body followed modern styling trends, and featured a panoramic wrap-around rear window and tail fins. There was space for 4 people, although the 2 in the back would have found their headroom rather restricted. The sales material of the time makes much of the car's passive safety features, such as the 2-spoke steering wheel with a recessed central hub, rounded door handles and a lock on the front seat backs to prevent them from tilting forwards unexpectedly. The padded dashboard and interior window frames were also unusual, and the claim can certainly be made that in terms of secondary safety, U.S. English, crashworthiness, the Lloyd Arabella marked a step forward for cars of this class. The spare wheel was stowed below the rear luggage compartment. It was stowed externally, which meant it could be accessed without having to empty out the luggage locker. Engine and transmission. It was originally planned to power the Arabella with an uprated version of the 2-cylinder, 2-stroke power unit used in the existing Lloyd Alexander, together with a suitably uprated gearbox from the same car. However, testing of a chassis equipped with this combination indicated that would not all fit under the hood bonnet of the body, which by that stage had been finalized. So a 4-cylinder boxer motor was hastily developed. The flat configuration of the boxer motor made it suitable for the low bonnet line of the stylish bodywork, but accommodating it in the available space remained a challenge, and the cooling fan had to be squeezed in above the 2 cylinders on the left side of the engine bay. Unlike the smaller existing Lloyd models, the Arabella used water to cool its engine. The gearbox was positioned ahead of the front axle and ahead of the engine, as on the manufacturer's smaller cars, but it had to be redesigned in order to fit beyond the engine in the relatively short engine bay. There was talk of installing the engine transversely, possibly in order to avoid having to redesign the gearbox to make it fit. But in the event, the Arabella featured a longitudinally mounted boxer motor, broadening the range. Downmarket. On its introduction in August 1959, the Arabella featured a 4-cylinder 897cc with a stated output of 38 PS, 28 kilowatts, at 4,800 revolutions per minute. During 1960, it was necessary to impose a major price increase, and in order to soften the blow, a reduced specification cut-price Arabella was launched in July 1960, still with the 897cc engine, but now in a detuned form, offering a maximum power output of only 34 PS, 25 kilowatts, at 4,700 revolutions per minute. Upmarket. In October 1960, a deluxe version of the Arabella was added to the range. As far as the technical specifications were concerned, the Arabella Deluxe was differentiated from the standard model by its engine. It was still a 4-cylinder 897cc unit, but maximum power was increased to 45 PS, 33 kilowatts, at 5,300 revolutions per minute. This was achieved by increasing the compression ration from 1.7.5 on the standard model to 1.9. That in turn meant that drivers had to pay a little more for their fuel, because the higher compression ration necessitated the use of the super-grade, high-octane petrol, gasoline, which was beginning to become available at West German service stations. The other important difference was the fitting of a larger Solex carburetor, 34 PSI in place of the 28 mm carburetor used for the standard cars. The result was a useful improvement in performance, with the top speed increased from 120 km per hour to 133 km per hour, from 75 miles per hour to 83 miles per hour, while the standing start time to 100 km per hour was reduced from 28 to 23 seconds. The Arabella Deluxe was in these respects significantly brisker than more expensive, albeit larger and heavier, cars such as the Ford Taunus or, more importantly, the class-defining Volkswagen with its advertised top speed, in 1960, of only 112 km per hour, 70 miles per hour, and leisurely standing start time to 100 km per hour of 38 seconds. From the outside, the Arabella Deluxe was differentiated by a revised radiator grille, featuring the traditional Borgward rhombus shape at its center, and the name Borgward was written on the front of the car in place of the name Lloyd, even though sources state that the car was only formally rebranded as the Borgward Arabella in 1961. It is possible that the need to clear unsold stocks of new cars meant that any announcement of a rebranding was deferred so that the cars identified with the Lloyd name on the front could be sold as new cars. First, Arabella Coupe. The Lloyd Sport Coupe is generally identified, in retrospect, as a coupe version of the Lloyd Arabella. In fact, the Sport Coupe, with a stylish body produced by Pietro Frua of Turin, made its debut at the Turin Motor Show in November 1958. At that stage it was powered by the 596cc two-stroke engine from the Lloyd Alexander TS. But the 6,000 German marks asking price, combined with the rustic sound and performance from the power unit, made the car unsellable. However, by this time the manufacturer had given Frua firm orders for 50 of the coupe bodies, and so the stylish little sport coupe reappeared at the Frankfurt Motor Show in September 1959, now as a coupe version of the Arabella. By the time the cars were actually disposed of, they were powered by the 45 PS, 33 kilowatts, high-compression engine version of the Arabella. Commercial. The Arabella was developed in just 23 months. There was a price to be paid for the rushed development schedule in terms of a large number of niggling faults and one or two more serious ones. The passenger cabin leaked on rainy days. The pattern of a pleasingly eye-catching, modern, inherently robust new model from Borgward marred by teething troubles affecting the early cars was a familiar one for Borgward buyers through the 1950s, but by 1959 waiting lists were down and the West German car market had become far less forgiving. Early teething troubles caused massive damage to the image of the Lloyd Arabella, and large numbers of unsold Arabellas began to fill the undeveloped land beside the factory where the cars were assembled. Considerable amounts of cash had been invested in the Arabella's development, including investment in a new assembly plant. Recovery of those costs from the sale of new cars necessitated a minimum level of sales, which the various technical niggles made unachievable in the marketplace. The car had been launched with a sticker price of 5,250 German marks. Less than a year later, in June 1960, the price was raised to 5,490 German marks, while the introduction of a cut-price reduced performance version nevertheless enabled the manufacturer to advertise a starting price for the reduced performance Arabella of 4,985 German marks. Meanwhile, the West German small car market was increasingly dominated by Volkswagen. Volkswagen achieved sales volumes that more than covered necessary investment in upgrades for a car of which the basic architecture had not changed in more than 10 years. The sticker price for a standard Volkswagen had been reduced in August 1955 to 3,790 German marks, where it stayed till September 1961, when it increased to 3,810 German marks. Pricing strategy for the Arabella was reversed in November 1960 with a price cut for the standard model to 5,230 German marks. This coincided with the introduction of the more powerful deluxe version, however, which was priced at 5,730 German marks. Information on sales volumes is unavailable, but production figures are known. Between 1959 and 1963, 47042 Arabellas were produced, of which nearly 70% were produced during 1960. Following the company's bankruptcy in 1961, the Arabella was the only model that continued in production for another couple of years, with the plant now rented from its new owner, and 893 Arabellas produced in 1963 by a group of former employees who had acquired the necessary rights during the liquidation process. Nevertheless, the size of the investment in developing and preparing to produce the Arabella, coupled with the failure to sell it in sufficient quantities to recover the investment within a reasonable period, were a major contributor to the company's bankruptcy in 1961. Meanwhile, following the appearance of two show cars at the September 1959 Motor Show, the 50 Früher Sport Coupe bodies were mated with to the underpinnings of the Arabella and offered for sale, now at a price of 7,500 German marks. Despite the improved performance characteristics available from the larger engine, there was no market for a miniature sport coupe Arabella in Germany, and while the two cars that had appeared at Frankfurt turned up again at several subsequent European motor shows, the rest of the cars were eventually earmarked for export. Most of them ended up on the USA, where they were used to grab attention in showrooms, and some of them found buyers as stylish second cars for the wives and daughters of one or two affluent buyers.